The morning began under a heavy sky, gray and wet, the kind of rain that seemed to seep into your bones and wash away all sense of warmth. The National Security Training Center stood silent except for the sound of boots striking puddles and the bark of orders echoing through the courtyard. Cadets lined up in rigid formation, water dripping from their caps, faces set in cold focus. Among them stood Leila Khan, shoulders squared, uniform crisp, heart pounding. To the world around her, she didn't belong there. At least that's what she'd been told countless times before she even stepped foot on this ground. You, in national security? Her uncle had laughed. You'll never last a week, girls. Like you don't make it through that kind of training. Another relative had said dismissively. The words had piled up over the years like stones in her chest, unseen, but unbearably heavy. She hadn't joined the program out of some thirst for glory or a naive dream of heroism. It had been born from something quieter, harder, a refusal to let others define her boundaries. She'd seen injustice firsthand, the kind that tore families apart and left fear in its wake. She wanted to stand between chaos and the innocent, to be the kind of strength she once needed. But within this elite institution, she found her greatest enemy wasn't the impossible, drills or brutal weather, it was the whispers. She's too slow. She's not cut out for this. She'll quit before the month's over. Every doubt that reached her ears only drove her harder. She ran until her lungs screamed, until her legs trembled under her. She trained with rifles until her shoulders burned and her hands blistered. At night, when others slept, she sat under the dull light of her bunk reading tactical manuals, memorizing patterns, studying every angle of combat psychology. And still, approval never came. Captain Farouk, one of the toughest instructors, seemed determined to remind her how far she still had to go. You're dragging your team down, he snapped one day during drills, his voice cutting through the rain. Out here, weakness isn't an option. Weakness gets people killed. Leila bit her tongue, forcing her frustration down. The obstacle course ahead looked endless, a maze of mud, wire, and pain. Mud sucked at her boots with every step, but she pushed through until she crossed the final line. Last, exhausted, but unbroken. 3 weeks into the program came the first major evaluation, a simulated hostage rescue. Every recruit dreaded it. The exercise was notorious for weeding out those who couldn't think under pressure. The cadets were divided into squads, each assigned a mock mission. To everyone's disbelief, Leila was named lead negotiator for her group. Why her? Someone whispered. She'll ruin the whole thing, another muttered. Even Captain Farouk raised a brow but said nothing. Orders were orders. The simulation began inside an abandoned training building turned into a makeshift conflict zone. Actors posing as hostage-takers shouted threats from inside. Chaos buzzed over the radios. Her squad looked at her expectantly, waiting for direction. Her palms were slick with sweat, but she steadied her breathing. This is Officer Khan, she said into the radio, her voice clear despite the pounding in her chest. We want everyone to walk out alive. Let's talk. At first there was no response. Then the crackling voice of a perpetrator came through, angry, panicked. She remembered her training. Stay calm, build trust, control the tempo. Slowly she drew them into conversation, letting them vent their frustration, acknowledging their fear, offering compromise instead of confrontation. Step by step she dismantled their hostility with patience and empathy. When the simulation ended, every hostage was rescued unharmed. No unnecessary force, no escalation. Silence filled the room before Captain Farouk finally said, "Not bad," with a nod that could have meant anything or everything. That evening, as the cadets cleaned their gear, a sudden stir rippled through the command office. The red secure line was ringing, a direct channel from the top offices of the nation. Colonel Nadim, the chief instructor, answered, his expression tightening. After a moment, his eyes found Leila through the window. "Yes, sir," he said into the phone. "She's here." A wave of unease passed through the room as he strode toward her. "Khan," he said sharply. "Drop everything and follow me." Her heart raced. Had she failed the test somehow? Was this about her performance? Inside the command office, the colonel handed her the receiver. "It's the president," he said quietly. Leila froze. "The president?" He nodded. "He asked for you by name." She lifted the phone, her voice barely steady. "This is Leila Khan." The voice on the other end was composed, authoritative yet warm. "Miss Khan, I've been briefed on your exercise today. That negotiation wasn't just a test. It reflected a real situation happening right now. We have an ongoing hostage crisis in the capital. Your method. It may be exactly what we need. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The president continued, "Would you be willing to assist our crisis response team?" Her answer came instantly. "Yes, sir." Minutes later, she was escorted to a secure communications center humming with tension. The room glowed with screens showing live drone feeds of a building surrounded by law enforcement. Officers spoke in urgent tones while negotiators huddled around tables strewn with maps and headsets. The lead negotiator, a veteran officer with years of experience, briefed her quickly. "We'll patch you through to the suspects. Just do what you did in training. Keep them talking." When her voice reached the perpetrators over the line, they were immediately suspicious. "Who are you? Another cop trying to fool us?" "No," Leila said gently. "I'm here to listen, no tricks. Tell me what's really going on." And they did. Slowly, the anger and chaos gave way to fear and confusion. She spoke to them not as criminals, but as humans on the edge. Every few minutes, a small victory, a hostage released, a demand softened. Time dragged on, but the tension in the control room began to ease. Finally, after hours of fragile negotiation, the voice on the other end broke. "We'll surrender. Just promise no one gets hurt." As the hostages emerged into the floodlights, some crying, some limping, a collective exhale filled the room. Officers clapped her on the shoulder. The veteran negotiator smiled for the first time all night. "You did it, kid." 2 days later, the rain returned as the cadets assembled once more on the parade ground. The president himself arrived, his presence commanding silence. He walked down the line until he stopped in front of Leila. "Miss Khan," he said, shaking her hand firmly, "your actions saved lives. You've proven that worth isn't decided by where you begin, but by how you rise when the moment calls for you." Her throat tightened, but she stood tall. The president turned to address the cadets. "Remember this. Sometimes the one you overlook is the one who will stand tall when it matters most. Never be too quick to decide who belongs and who doesn't." Captain Farouk's eyes met hers across the line. There was something new there. Not pity, not disbelief. Respect. That night, Leila sat alone in her bunk, listening to the rain tap against the windows. The echoes of her uncle's laughter, the whispers of doubt, all felt distant now, like voices carried away by the storm. The real victory, she realized, wasn't the president's praise or the applause of her peers. It was the quiet certainty that when her chance came, she had been ready. Not because anyone believed in her, but because she refused to quit when no one did. Because she decided that her worth was hers to define, and no one could take that away again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real mission stories.